Chapter 1. Grief and Loss. The first thing we see is Merlin sleeping, but he's not sleeping well. He's having a nightmare remembering what happened the last time we saw him, when he lost Arthur, his master, his king, his friend. After hearing himself scream Arthur's name, he suddenly awakes. He bolts upright in bed, eyes flashing gold. His window is closed, but there is a breeze knocking his hair about. Looking up, he realises that the ceiling fan is wearing out of control by an unintentional use of his magic. Merlin raises a hand, intending to use magic to stop the ceiling fan, when the fan snaps off its axle. The blades from the ceiling fan spin towards Merlin, yet he ducks and they pinwheel over his head and crash onto the floor. Shuddering, Merlin holds his head between his hands. "It was a dream," he whispers to himself. "It was just a dream." He's gasping, sweat-soaked and shaking. His nightmare has left him traumatised. "Just focus on breathing, Merlin," he murmurs to himself. "The living comes after." He then slides to the edge of his bed where he sits trying to recover. He glances at a digital clock on his bedside table. 3:07 AM. But what's more important, it's now the 21st century. Rising from his bed, Merlin crosses to his window. He's on the second story of a flat positioned in the heart of London City. Outside it's raining. He looks out over London, watching the cars pass below him in the streets. Seeing Merlin now was a stark contrast to the way we are accustomed to seeing him. It had been 1500 years since Arthur's death. It's hard to grasp that this is the same hopeful boy we met at the beginning of his story. Now, even without the aging spell, you can see that the centuries of loss and suffering have aged him. Though he has maintained the physical appearance of a man in his late 20s to early 30s, light stubble adds to his visible maturity. Around Merlin's neck, we see a black cord, at the end of which dangles the royal seal ring that had once been Arthur's. The Pendragon crest in the centre of it shines as it catches light from the city below, and as Merlin gazes over London, he runs his thumb along its surface, remembering his friend. He then dons his day clothes, coat, hat and all, and slings his satchel over his shoulder. He then stands by the front door, and we see him close his eyes as he begins to murmur a spell. Miat dagan, bepege mi, adiap isne gas min, friandon, und min fiandon. Merlin's face then gradually ages decades. Wrinkles line his features, a wispy white beard grows. He transforms into old Merlin. Once the aging spell is complete, he exits his flat. As he heads down the sidewalk, he looks alone, secluded. The civilians who pass him are oblivious to his pain, as they are to the world from which he comes. Chapter 2. I Couldn't Save Him. We then go back to a flashback, and we find Percival right where we left him, searching for Merlin and Arthur. He hurries through the forest on horseback, scanning his surroundings urgently. He breaks into the forest, coming upon the Lake of Avalon, and dismounts his horse and comes towards the lake. After a moment of glancing around with only the moon shining off the water for light, he spots something, someone. It's Merlin. But why is he alone? "Merlin!" Percival calls. He approaches, but Merlin doesn't acknowledge him. His face is wet with tears, but his expression is far off. It's numb. "Merlin! Where is Arthur?" Merlin stares ahead, still shell-shocked from Arthur's death. "Where is our king, Merlin?" "He's gone," Merlin finally responds. "Couldn't save him." This revelation shocks Percival. Arthur is dead, their king, their pillar. After everything, it was all in vain. Percival sits beside Merlin. They stare out over the glassy black waters of the lake, devastated. "Did you come alone?" Merlin asked Percival. "Gwen was with me." "Where is he now?" "He's dead. I couldn't save him either." Merlin is not surprised. He has seen so much death over the past few days that he's come to expect it. He doesn't have the strength to cry anymore. He's run out of tears. After a sorrowful moment, Percival musters his strength and rises. He extends a hand to Merlin. "We've got to get back to Camelot, Merlin." "Why?" Merlin responds. "What is a servant without his master?" "You're still my friend, Merlin." Merlin then finally looks at Percival for the first time. He looks at the offered hand for a moment, then accepts it, and lets Percival help him up. He follows him from the shoreline, throwing a final glance over his shoulder at the Lake of Avalon. Chapter 3. Castle Ruins. We then head back to present Merlin as he steps through the trees and comes to the peak of the hill overlooking Camelot. From here we can see the castle for the first time. Despite the centuries, it has remained mostly intact, though ruins still provides an accurate description. Time has altered the once prosperous kingdom, its mightiness giving way to mould, decay and war. Merlin can see flashlight beams of security guards who patrol the grounds and protect it from intruders, such as himself. He evades the security guards and the sweeping beams of their flashlights without effort. He reaches the entrance of the main square and hides in the shadows, watching and waiting. Before deciding that it is safe to enter, he lets his guard down and leaves his hiding place. He strides across the main square, making for the stairs. He's nearly reached them when... "Can I help you?" A flashlight beams on Merlin's back. A few yards behind him is a security guard. Without turning around, Merlin lets his eyes roll shut, irritated at this inconvenience. "You're trespassing on private property," the security guard said. "Not as private as I wish it were." The security guard then lowered his flashlight, as Merlin rotated to face him. The security guard then broke into a smirk. "Good evening, Ambrosius." "Lewis?" They know each other. Evidently Merlin tries to sneak into the castle ruins often. "It's been a while since your last intrusion. Urged to come back and clean the castle too strong to resist again? I do a better job keeping up on the castle than you do." "You're trespassing on Miss Plunkett's property. Quite the opposite, actually," Merlin interrupts the security guard. "You are trespassing on King Arthur's property." This again. They had clearly had this conversation before. "This always, until you finally see that I am telling the truth. It is King Arthur's castle, and one day he will return." Ambrosius, look. I've been polite, but you can't keep coming back here. This castle belongs to Darlene Plunkett, not your make-believe dead king. Merlin shuts his eyes tight at the tactless phrasing. "I'm going to have to escort you off the premises. You can come quietly or not." "I'm getting really sick of being told what to do," Merlin then said. "So I'm going to go with not." Merlin then extends his hand and levitates Lewis several feet off the ground with magic. He suspends him there, then lets him fall, but he freezes the man in the air just inches above the stone, not allowing him to hit the ground. With Lewis still hovering there, Merlin approaches him. He raises his other hand and, giving it a swish, he takes away Lewis's consciousness, and then lets him drop. He then turns and heads up the stairs that lead into the castle. As he ascends, his aging enchantment fades, rendering his appearance back to that of young Merlin. The way he can so easily transition between young and old is a testament of his advanced powers. Chapter 4. They carry a body. We then go back to another flashback and see Gwen gazing out of the window, anxiety etched into her face. "My lady?" Gwen then spins to face Leon, who has entered the room looking graver than ever before. Percival and Merlin have just passed through the main gate. They are entering the courtyard as we speak. Gwen forces herself to nod. There is a dread-filled pause. "They carry with them a body." "Arthur?" Gwen says, terrified. "I cannot say for certain." This is it. Gwen prepares herself. She hurries past Leon for the door. She forgets queenly manners. Gwen breaks into a full-out run as she descends the stairs, her gown following out behind her. She then stops at the top of the steps. She is met by Percival and another knight, who are coming up the steps carrying Gwyn's dead body. She is heartbroken to see Gwyn, once so full of life, now lying limp in her friend's arms. Leon meets Percival and the knight halfway up the steps and helps him bear Gwyn inside. Gwen then approaches Merlin, who has only just dismounted his horse. When Merlin sees her, he assumes his respectful servant posture, hands behind his back, head bowed. "My lady, Merlin cannot find the words. The results of his attempts to save Arthur are clear. But her husband is dead. "Arthur!" Gwen's worst fears have become her reality. She breaks into tears. Merlin wrestles with his own emotions at seeing her like this. Gaius then descends the last few steps and approaches, stopping in front of Merlin, an expression of profound grief coming over his face. Merlin's sorrow in Arthur's absence says it all. He failed. Gaius engulfs Merlin in an embrace, where Merlin gives up on his fight against the tears. Chapter 5. Start of Time. We then head back to present Merlin, who passes through Gaius' ruined chambers, going over his invisible checklist of preparations, should Arthur decide to make an appearance anytime soon. Scrub the floors, tidy the bedchambers, wash the windows, Merlin murmurs to himself. Merlin then enters his old room, which is now empty save a bucket of soapy water and a scrub brush. He retrieves them both and leaves, on his way to Arthur's old chambers. When he arrives, he opens the door, carries the bucket and brush to the centre of the room, sets them down and goes about scrubbing the ancient floors. This is when it really dawns on us that Merlin has been doing his usual chores, serving Arthur, for 1500 years. "Don't worry, sire," Merlin says to himself. "I've kept them nice and clean for you. I mean, they've never quite recovered from all those curses, but I do a pretty good job, I think." Merlin looks about until his eyes settle on the shut curtains. He smiles and says, "Why don't we let some of that light in?" He then rises and heads over to the window. He raises his hands and throws back the tattered curtains. "Rise and shine, sire." He then turns to face the rest of the empty room. The smile fades. A tangible sense of loneliness is heavy upon the room. Chapter 6. 3 years. We then head back to another flashback, as we see Gaius as he sets down a bowl of soup on the table. "Supper is ready," he calls. But Merlin does not appear, so Gaius walks to Merlin's bedroom door. "Merlin?" he calls once more. Gaius nudges Merlin's bedroom door open, but the room is vacant. The door to Gaius' chambers creaks. As Gaius turns around, in enters Merlin, looking worn but determined. He makes his way to the suit of armour that he's left on the table. "I've made some soup for you," Gaius says to Merlin. "Thank you, Gaius. I'll eat later," Merlin responds. "Merlin, surely you must know that today is the anniversary of Arthur's passing. It will not be long before the people are gathering in the courtyard for Arthur's memory. They'll be lighting their candles soon. Perhaps you should go with them." "I have some things I need to take care of," Merlin says, clearly avoiding Gaius' gaze. "Merlin, it has been 3 years. Arthur would want you to let go." Merlin then seizes up the armour and starts for the door. "Arthur would want me to wait for him." "Merlin!" Merlin freezes at the door but doesn't turn around. "You cannot keep living like this," Gaius says to him. Collecting himself, Merlin then pushes open the door. Arthur's armour isn't going to polish itself. He then exits the room. Chapter 7. Gwens Decision. After Merlin leaves, he passes Leon in the hall, carrying Arthur's armour. "Merlin, where are you off to in such a hurry?" "I have to polish Arthur's armour." Stopping, Leon watches Merlin leave, an uncomfortable look in his eyes. Merlin then arrives at Arthur's chambers. He enters, setting Arthur's armour out on the table, and he begins to polish. "Merlin?" Startled, Merlin drops Arthur's helmet. It rolls along the floor, landing at Gwen's feet. The Queen is dressed in a black mourning gown in honour of the anniversary of Arthur's death. There is a sad sort of beauty about her. Merlin watches her lift the fallen helmet, her crown glittering in the candlelight. Gwen examines the helmet. "I always thought he looked a bit ridiculous in this thing." Gwen then gives the helmet a loving stroke before returning it to Merlin. "I'm sorry," Merlin then said. "I didn't realise you were in here. I thought you would be in your new chambers at this time of night." "That's all right," Gwen responds. "I thought I might visit Arthur's old chambers before heading down to the courtyard." "What are you up to?" "Oh, I was just polishing Arthur's armour." Gwen is troubled by his response. Merlin uses polishing Arthur's armour as an excuse not to look at Gwen. "I want you to stand with me when the candles are lit tonight in honour of Arthur." "I can't. I have things I must attend to." "Surely they can wait. I've hardly seen you lately." "I've been busy." "Merlin," Gwen says, almost pleading. "This needs to stop. We all miss Arthur, but it's been 3 years. You cannot keep doing this to yourself. You are not the only one who misses Arthur. He was my husband. Is your husband," Merlin says desperately. "You can't marry Sir Leon." "Leon is a good man." "Better than Arthur?" "That isn't fair, Merlin." "I love Arthur, but he will rise again, Gwen." "I am Queen of Camelot," Gwen stated to Merlin. "Arthur would understand that I have to make difficult decisions for the good of the people." "You think making Leon king will honour Arthur?" "You don't have the power to anoint a king. Sir Leon will just be your consort, nothing more. You can't do this to Arthur. You are betraying him." "Enough, Merlin, that is enough!" Tears glisten in Gwen's eyes, but she looks at Merlin with the measured gaze of a queen. "Of all people, I think I would know what Arthur would have wanted for all of us. And you need to accept the decisions I make as ruler of Camelot." Dead silence punctuates her words. "Forgive me for speaking out of turn," Merlin says, clearly detached. He then hurries to collect the armour and faces Gwen. "If that will be all, I have other duties that I must see to." Gwen stares at him, thrown by his sudden formality. "My lady?" He then bows and exits, leaving Gwen alone in Arthur's chambers. Chapter 8. Just Hold Me. We then head back to present Merlin, as we see sunset is ending. After a long day of tidying the castle, Merlin is now leaving, walking across the grounds outside. Arthur is still not back at the close of day. Just another lonely night ahead, Merlin thinks to himself. Yet suddenly, Merlin stops. He feels the wind change. Merlin then whips around. There is a brilliant sunset above the castle. Sunlight cuts through the clouds and pours down around him in rays. First, Merlin searches the sky, but he realises he is meant to be looking down to where the light is pointing. In the grass beneath his feet, the light rays shape the golden Pendragon crest. Only one thing is different about it. The dragon in the symbol is wearing a crown. Merlin bounds up the steps. He tears down the corridor. In the time it took Merlin to get here, the sun has sunk below the horizon. He searches the sky, desperate for what he hopes this all means. Thousands of stars spill out across the heavens. One by one, the stars shoot from their positions, streaking in ribbons of light that linger in their wake. Soon, all the stars in the heavens are raining down in bolts of multicoloured light, and they're all moving towards the same direction. "The Lake of Avalon," Merlin whispers to himself in realisation. "Arthur." Merlin then tears through the forest. He throws a glance upward, seeing that the stars still shoot toward the lake. Through the tangled trees and brambles he stumbles out onto the shoreline. Merlin's eyes dart in every direction. When nothing happens, he approaches the edge of the lake. There is a subtle glow to the water, like a silver fire is burning within its depths. The lake's glow intensifies, growing to its brilliance in blinding white. Merlin throws his hands up to shield his eyes. The glow of the lake builds to a climax. There is a moment of breathless silence where all the wonder and the power are summoned into one white-hot nucleus at the centre of the lake, before a massive eruption of light throws Merlin back against the tree. The light then recedes into darkness. The stars stop shooting. Once more, Merlin is alone. He forces himself to his feet and approaches the water. He glances around, scans the area, but the lake appears ordinary. Not a change, not a sound. Nothing. Merlin is devastated. It appears he was wrong again. Arthur is nowhere to be seen. After a hopeless moment, Merlin slowly turns around and starts to walk away. "Merlin?" Merlin freezes, tensing up. Can it be? Little by little he turns his head. Arthur stands knee-deep in the lake, looking back at Merlin, somehow still dry from the waist up. Chainmail, golden crown, crimson cloak sweeping off his back. Hanging from his belt shines his enchanted sword, Excalibur. The majesty of the King of Camelot is unmatched. Merlin's body locks up. He can't speak, can't move. "Merlin?" Merlin stares ahead, trembling. After all this time, it's too good to be true. "Arthur?" "Hello, Merlin." Arthur looks back at him, smiling, eyes shining with tears. "Arthur!" 1,500 years of goodbye are now overshadowed by that one single hello. Arthur takes a step towards the shoreline. Suddenly freed, Merlin sprints into the water. He slips, falling under, but as he resurfaces, coughing and spluttering, he continues towards Arthur. Arthur laughs and reaches for his arm to help him, but it isn't necessary. "Arthur!" Merlin shouts once more. He then throws his arms around Arthur, and Arthur pulls him into a fierce embrace. Sobs rack Merlin's body. This is the moment he's been waiting for. After 1,500 years, his friend has finally returned. After an emotional minute, Arthur pulls back to get a look of Merlin. "Miss me much?" he asks. Merlin can only manage a frantic nod, too overcome to speak. "It's good to see you, Merlin." I... No, Merlin. You don't have to say anything." No. Merlin has to get these words out. He musters up enough voice to say, "I waited for you, Arthur. I waited for you all this time." Arthur says nothing for a moment, not entirely sure what all this time means. Arthur does not yet know how long it's been since his death. "This is over now," he says to Merlin. "I missed you." "Well, I'm here now." "You're here?" Merlin is too overwhelmed to process much, but "I'm here" connects with his brain and he latches onto it. "You're really here?" "Yes," Arthur says, smiling. "That's right. I'm really here." Merlin throws his arms around Arthur once more. He still just can't take it in. After another moment, Arthur pulls away. He begins to take in Merlin's modern attire. "What the hell are you wearing?" Merlin then makes another attempt to laugh, but ends up as another sob. "You alright?" Arthur asks. "You're not going to drown in your own tears, are you?" Merlin tries to smile through his tears. "Honestly, Merlin, you're a disaster. Come on." He then leads Merlin to land. "Let's get out of here before you freeze." The moment they reach dry land, Merlin's legs give way. Still overwhelmed, he stumbles to the ground, almost dragging Arthur down with him. "What? Merlin! Come on! On your feet!" Merlin stays where he is on the ground, not ready to move from their reunion so abruptly. Arthur slowly forsakes his attempts to hoist Merlin up and awkwardly stares down at him. After a moment's hesitation, Arthur stoops to be level with him. "Merlin, are you alright?" Merlin gazes at him. He hugs Arthur from the side, and Arthur notices that Merlin is shivering. "You're as cold as death, Merlin. We need to get you dry. Just..." Merlin says, cutting him off. "Just hold me. Please." Arthur stares at Merlin. After a moment, he puts his arm around him. Arthur then leads Merlin away from the Lake of Avalon into a cluster of trees. He takes the time to pry Merlin's arms off of him. "Alright now, Merlin. That's enough now. Clean yourself up." Arthur gives Merlin's shoulder an affectionate shake. Merlin draws a deep, trembling breath, wipes at his tears and tries to get a grip of himself. "Are you alright?" Arthur asks. "Yeah." "Good. Do you know some place warm we could go?" "The castle isn't far from here." "But Arthur, you should know." "Then to Camelot it is," Arthur says, cutting Merlin off. "To Camelot," Merlin murmurs. Chapter 9. 1,500 years. Arthur and Merlin then trek through the forest land towards the ruins of Camelot. Arthur is too preoccupied taking in his surroundings to pay much attention to Merlin, who stares sideways at Arthur, unable to take his eyes off him. In the distance, they can see the castle, but it is still too far that Arthur doesn't notice its ruined state. An eerie wind pulls at the trees, and nightly sounds surround them. Upon entering an empty valley bordered by trees, Arthur halts dead in his tracks. "This," he says, filled with dread. "This was the village of Camelot, wasn't it?" Merlin gives a grim nod. Arthur then looks at him. "How long has it been, Merlin?" After a moment, Merlin then responds. 547,451 days. 17,999 months. 1,500 years. It's like the wind has been knocked out of Arthur. He staggers. There is nothing that can compare to the absolute horror that grips him at those words. 1,500 years! Arthur then throws a hand out to steady himself but grasps only air, until Merlin takes him by the arm and eases him down into the grass. As Arthur stares straight ahead through tears, he shakes his head, tries to return himself to a state of coherence, as the realisation that he has lost everyone hits him. 1,500 years, he says once more. After a few moments of trying to take this in, Arthur brings himself to look at Merlin, who is kneeling at his side and sharing in his pain. Arthur then realises that Merlin is all he has left now. "How are you still here?" Arthur asks. "I'm immortal." "Immortal?" "I sort of activated it while you were away at the Battle of Camlan, when I harnessed the full capacity of my magic. Then everyone else is gone. We're all that's left." They both fall silent. After a moment, Merlin gets to his feet and offers a hand to Arthur, who accepts the hand and gets up. Arthur follows Merlin into the dell. Merlin and Arthur cross the courtyard and climb the stairs to the ancient doors of the castle. Merlin opens the doors and stands back to let Arthur enter first. After a beat, Arthur steps forward and leads the way inside. Chapter 10. Heart to Heart. "I'm sorry about the mess," Merlin says. "I would have been able to keep the castle in a better order, but an old apprentice of mine cursed it, and it's never been the same since." Arthur is not really listening. He comes to stand before the round table, where Merlin soon joins him. Arthur runs a finger along the dusty table. "What happened to Guinevere after my death?" Merlin is silent for a moment, calculating the proper response. "Gwen ruled Camelot for a number of prosperous years. As a queen, she had no equal. Under her rule, magic was made lawful. Camelot flourished." Arthur fixed his gaze on the Pendragon crest at the centre of the table, not wanting to look Merlin in the eye as he asks, "Did she marry?" "When you were gone," Merlin says, clearly hurt at having to say it, "Camelot needed an heir." "Who did she marry?" "Sir Leon." "And was she happy?" It was as if a knife was twisting in Merlin's chest. No matter what he answered with, Arthur would still be hurt. "She never stopped missing you. Merlin, was she happy?" "Yes, sire. I think she was." "Good." Wind wails through the deserted castle halls. To give Arthur a moment, Merlin heads across the room and, using magic, conjures a floating campfire. No logs required. He leaves the fire levitating in the air. "It's cold," Merlin says to Arthur. "You should come and warm yourself." As Arthur leaves the round table and joins Merlin, they sit down together by the fire. "Must have been hard for you, hiding your magic all those years." "It was. Who else knew?" Gaius, Lancelot, of course. And Mordred, Merlin says without thinking. Arthur flinches, like the name has caused him physical pain, causing Merlin to regret having spoken it aloud. I should have never trusted him. He betrayed you. You can't help that. Silent reigns for a moment. How did you know when I would return? Arthur then asks. I didn't. I had been told you would return when Albion needed you most, but other than that I was in the dark. It wasn't until this evening that I got this sense, this feeling. And how did it feel? Arthur asks. Good. It felt good. What about you? Could you feel anything while you were... Could you see anything? No. It was just sort of hazy. Like a state between sleep and dream. But I felt that I'd somehow been broken in half. Like a part of me was missing. I know the feeling, Merlin responds. Chapter 11. It's not your fault. The beam of a flashlight then shoots at them through a window. Get back! Merlin whispers. He extinguishes their fire by passing a hand over it and pulls Arthur out of view of the window. What on earth is that? A torch. That is not a torch! Not the kind you're used to. Merlin then edges closer to the window as he tries to peer outside. It's one of the guards. They're still around! What? No, not the guards of Camelot. The guards of Plunket. Who? I think they're coming inside. We have to hide. They then descend down the stairs. Do you think they saw us? Arthur asks. Probably. No doubt they found poor Lewis in the courtyard by now. At the bottom of the stairs, when they round a corner, they then slump onto the hallway floor, their backs against the stone wall. Footsteps travel down the stairs. Now might be a good time to put your magic to use, Merlin, Arthur whispers. Merlin then peers around the corner and catches sight of the shadow of a security guard coming down the steps. He raises a hand out towards the stairs. Ligfia. There is a deep, roaring sound. From the air, Merlin conjures an enormous flaming phoenix, its wings spreading across the circumference of the hall. The security guard on the stairs gives a cry. We can hear his panicked footsteps dashing back up the stairs. Merlin then twists his wrist to make the phoenix disappear. Arthur is still not accustomed to seeing Merlin wield magic, particularly such of dramatic nature. That could have saved us a lot of trouble before. What do you mean, could have? Merlin says, chuckling. Arthur then gives a brief smile. So, how does it feel, after all this time, being alive? Getting to use the word alive in reference to Arthur seems to bring Merlin considerable joy. Arthur ponders the question. It feels like the first day of spring. Merlin gives his first big smile. He's positively glowing from ear to ear. I feel like that too. Arthur's smile, however, fades as his eyes sweep the deserted corridor. What happened to Camelot? Saxons, Merlin responds. Has it been empty ever since? People have tried to claim it for centuries, but no one stayed for long, Merlin explains. I've made sure of that. But I couldn't stop everything. I'm sorry, Arthur, for everything that's happened. It's not your fault, Merlin. They pass into silence. Arthur removes his crown and rests his head against the wall, shutting his eyes. Merlin then looks at Arthur. It hurts him that there isn't anything he can do to ease Arthur's pain at losing everyone. But after a moment, Merlin rests his head on Arthur's shoulder and closes his eyes. Chapter 12. The Stolen Seal. We then go back to a flashback in Gaius' chambers. Merlin, come and help me wash these potion vials. When Gaius receives no response, he looks across to the door of Merlin's bedroom. He crosses over to it, prodding it open to see that Merlin is packing. You're leaving, Gaius says. Stopping to look up at Gaius, Merlin responds. I was going to tell you. But why? Magic is legal again, you no longer have to hide your gifts. But for what? Merlin exclaims. I only used magic for Arthur. Now that Arthur is gone, there is nothing left for me here. I am. Gaius, Merlin says, pained with regret. No words can express how Merlin feels. Taking pity, Gaius pushes his own wishes aside. Where will you go? Eldor. It's been too long since I've seen my mother. Are you sure you aren't going to wait until after Leon's coronation ceremony? Merlin then meets Gaius with a look that clearly names the ceremony as a key reason for his departure. You should at least say goodbye to Gwen. She won't want to see me. She won't? Or you don't? Merlin cannot answer. You cannot resent her for her decision to marry Leon, Merlin. I am sure it was not an easy one. Sir Leon is a fine knight, but that's all he'll ever be. He is no king of Camelot, and I cannot swear allegiance to him. We do not know when Arthur will return, Gaius responds. What we do know is that Camelot needs an heir. Leon is a noble man. I'm sure he will bring prosperity to the kingdom. And what of Arthur's vision? A fair and just kingdom for all. You think Sir Leon will lead us there? Yes, Merlin. I do. Well, I can't. Merlin then finishes packing, slides his coat over both arms, and he stands before Gaius. After a moment, the two of them meet in a fierce embrace. I'm sorry, Merlin says. It's alright. You don't have to explain it to me. I will always be right here, if you ever need an old physician. Or just a really good friend, Merlin says. Yes. Always that. Goodbye, Merlin. Goodbye, guys. Gathering himself up, taking in his surroundings, Merlin looks last at Gaius and then leaves. The door closes behind him. Gaius lingers in the bedroom, taking in its emptiness, until he hears a knock at the door. He heads into the main room to see Percival entering. Yes? Coronation has been delayed, Percival says. Why is that? Gaius asks. The royal seal has gone missing. They're turning the castle upside down in search for it. Missing? Gaius says in the utmost surprise. When did it go missing? Just this morning, Percival responds. He then looks around. Where is Merlin? He has left for Eldor. And when did he decide that? Just this morning. Neither of them say a word for a moment, processing the connection between Merlin's disappearance and the missing royal seal. Something tells me they will not find that seal, Percival says. No, Gaius says, with a smirk on his face. I don't believe they will. Chapter 13. Less Alone. As we then head back to present day, sunlight illuminates the castle halls, rays shining light on Merlin's face to wake him up where he sits still leaning against a wall at the bottom of the stairs. He rolls his head lazily to the right, opening his eyes. Dulled with sleep, it takes him a moment to become fully conscious that the space on the floor next to him is vacant. Arthur is gone. Arthur? Merlin calls out. He scans the area with his eyes to find it empty. Arthur! As he gets his feet under him, glancing around, Arthur is nowhere in sight. Arthur? Where are you? Merlin says, panicking. No. It was real. It wasn't a dream. It must have been real. It must have. He murmurs to himself. It had to be real. The return of reality hits Merlin like a wave. He staggers back to the floor. It wasn't real. None of it. He must have dreamt Arthur, or imagined him, or hallucinated him. Arthur! He says to himself, distraught. He sinks down onto his side, crying. He finds himself, as he ever has been, alone. After a long moment of crying, he collects himself. With a shuddering breath, he pushes to his feet. His tears have never brought Arthur back before, they are not going to now. As he heads over to Gaius' chambers and makes for his room, he retrieves the scrub and bucket. There is a determination in him, almost a rage. As he pushes open the door to Arthur's chambers, he then makes his way to the centre of the room and slams down his bucket and begins scrubbing the floors vigorously, trying to use the work to stave off his grief. Scrubbing grows to a violent level, until Merlin notices that the suds surrounding his brush are tainted with blood. He has skinned his hands and is bleeding on the floor. As he raises his hands to look at them, his trembling fingers are wet with blood. Pushed over the edge, Merlin seizes the scrub and brush and throws it across the room, letting out a deep scream of anguish. He rakes his fingers through his hair, rocking back and forth on his knees, just crying. Merlin? Merlin freezes at the sound of his name. His head slowly turns. Standing in the threshold of the room is Arthur. What are you doing? Arthur asks, deeply concerned. Arthur! Are you alright, Merlin? The relief and liberation Merlin experienced yesterday had time to build. As it all came flooding over him at once, he tried not to cry. He begins to fiddle with the bucket to hide his emotions. I was just cleaning. Arthur meets Merlin in the middle of the room, lowering himself to his level, but Merlin refuses to look at him. Merlin. I'm just Merlin. Merlin brings himself to look at Arthur. Why are you in here? I was cleaning. And why are you cleaning? It's my duty, Merlin responds, gesturing to the suit of armour in the corner. I've kept it polished for you, and I've washed your windows, and I've dusted, and now I'm scrubbing the floors. Yes, and bleeding all over them. Sorry. Merlin, why have you been doing all of this? Merlin takes a moment to muster enough voice for a response. It made me feel closer to you. It made me feel less alone. He averts his gaze by staring at the handle of his bucket, bringing it between his hands. Arthur then reaches for the bucket and takes it away, setting it out of reach. Grabbing Merlin by the shoulder, he pulls him into a firm embrace. It wasn't a dream. Arthur really is here. The relief is overwhelming. You are not alone, Arthur says. I'm here now. Alright? Merlin nods. Come on. We've been through this. I'm not going anywhere. I'm sorry. Why on earth do you keep apologising, Merlin? You have nothing to be sorry for. Come on. Pull yourself together. Arthur then watches Merlin wipe away his tears before he rises to his feet to prompt Merlin into getting a grip. Arthur turns, taking in the sight of his now decayed chambers. Merlin pushes up from the floor and approaches the window. With trembling hands, he reaches forward and throws open the curtains, allowing light to spill into the chambers. Merlin closes his eyes. Rise and shine, sire. And for the first time in 1500 years, when Merlin turns around, Arthur is standing there, gazing back at him in the light of a new day. Chapter 14. The King has returned. As we stay in present time, we then head over to Crystalline Castle. Crystalline Castle is a resplendent palace for its old age. Though much younger than the crumbling walls of Camelot, a far cry from the modernity of its time, but not entirely medieval in its own right. It is far enough from the city that it maintains a sense of magic about it. Tall and pale, Accolon, a classy and attractive man, early 30s with jet black hair, wearing a black suit and overcoat, steals down the steps of the lavish palace, head bowed against the rain. A cab is waiting for him, and he slips into the back seat. You know where to take me, Accolon then says. As the cab then makes its way into London City and through the streets, it suddenly slows to a stop. Wait here. Without waiting for a response, Accolon exits the cab and steps into Westminster Bridge. The bridge is empty, or at least it would be, were it not for one man whose back is turned, standing like a ghost in the fog. Accolon makes his way into the middle of the bridge where his associate stands at the edge, gazing out over the water below. Before Accolon reaches him, the man begins to speak. Have you ever wondered whether a man who sees in colour but lives in a greyscale world could know he wasn't colourblind? Accolon then comes alongside him. Or what it must feel like to a musician trapped in a world of unintelligible sound. Would he know true music at once when he heard it? Could he hear it over the noise? Accolon is silent, waiting for an explanation to the riddles. I believe he would, the man continues. I believe that the moment that, somewhere in the world, a true melody began to play, he would perceive it and know he wasn't alone. You would not have summoned me here, were it not at the utmost importance, Accolon then says. Lord Accolon, I have seen colour in this greyscale world. I have heard the first notes of an ancient song that has only just begun to play. Magic of the deepest kind has penetrated the border between past and present. Magic is here? Accolon asks. I have felt it. The king has returned. So what now? The man then turns to give Accolon a sidelong smile. It's Mordred. The man who felled Arthur so many centuries ago. It means, Lord Accolon, the battle for Albion begins with the dawn.